Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Energy Unleashed. My name is Suzanne Worthley with my partner, Kim Hess, today. Hello, lady.
Hello to you. Hello, everyone.
We were setting up for this, and I was saying you kind of look like a supermodel because you're out on your porch and you've got the
Oh,
wind tossing. You got the
yeah,
wind
right.
tossing your hair there, Beyonce.
We have gusty winds, so I apologize up front if it gets a little breezy, but
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
I have like not an ounce of sunshine in my cabin. It's like ridiculously overcast. So ironically, this is funny because well, it isn't funny, but I mean it's odd in that the concept that I want to talk about today, Kim, is grief, because I've been coming up against so many different kinds of grief. And when you say the word grief, we instantly go to the thought of a death, right?
Hmm.
I mean, instantly. And
Hmm.
it's so interesting to me to sit there and think of things like we grieve all the time. And I really want to talk through this from a lot of different aspects and sort of unleash different areas of the actual concept of grief. And even to the extent of we're sitting up here in this beautiful northern woods, and I'm looking outside going, oh my God, no, the leaves are turning. No, we're
Not
we're
yet, not
already
yet.
anticipatory wise grieving summer, right? I mean, grief in a
Ah,
big way. I want to talk a little bit big, then zero in and then expand again. But yeah, instantly we think of the word as a death
well, I'm grieving today because we are leaving this
because you're
afternoon.
leaving, right?
So I'm already missing the lake before we even leave. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's important for us to really, as humans, because of the fact that we're so terrified of grief for death,
Mhm.
I think if humans trained themselves a little bit differently in their mind, body, and soul to understand grief is part of every single solitary day of our lives. And we don't have to see it the same as we do when we're so caught up in the grief of a loss of a loved one.
Mhm.
Meaning, when we can start to understand, well, gosh, I'm grieving going home today. What does that feel like? What do my emotions feel like? What does my body feel like? And get comfortable with the fact of allowing our bodies to go through the process of grieving without only having it to do when it's a person or a pet,
Right.
right?
Right. Oh no, I woke up this morning and was already just there's like a little, I would call it, it's not really it's not sadness necessarily, but it's a little flutter of, oh,
Yep.
I just am not ready to go. And I
Yeah.
could, that was my thought waking up this morning. So my whole day that I'm kind of just trudging, lower energy, I could feel
Mhm.
it because I
Right.
don't want to go. Yeah.
Right. And I think that these are some of the things that we want to talk about in a general area, and then we'll zero in on some other things and kind of unpack and unleash more. But emotions of grief are something that we go through all the time. And I mean, here's you sitting there saying, okay, I have to go home. So I have emotions of it is sadness of sorts. It's not the sadness that we equate to the loss of a loved one, but it is sadness. It can be relief, it can be confusion, it can be frustration, it can be numbness, it can be envy, yearning, joy, stuff, all of it. And it's funny because yesterday my whole family went home. We had the barrage up here
Mhm.
for the holiday, and my whole family went home. And there's a piece of me that grieves the energy of, oh my God, they're all gone. And
Yeah.
then a huge part of me has relief. And
Like,
so, right. And so when we grieve, we get confused because I can still literally have an emotion that's confusing of relief and, relaxed and joy and wonderment of God, they're all gone. And then that's like, God, that's guilty. So we get very confused on our emotions when it comes to the word grief. I
mhm.
think that's just super interesting to think about because we're doing it all day long, the emotions of grief.
Yeah, I believe I do that continually through depending on what's going on for the day.
Right.
Because I can talk to my mom and one of their friends passed away. And then I feel, I that as an empath, it's like, all right, I can feel that. And then you go and watch a news story that's just
Yep.
crazy and a bunch of people died in a shooting or whatever. And there's a little more grief. And then, as you go through the day, you're like, oh my gosh, you just not like there's so many days I don't pay attention to it. By the end of the day, I'm exhausted
Right.
because I'm not realizing. how much grief is happening through the day and how I'm handling it, I guess,
And that's, you hit the
processing it.
nail on the head. What I want to even unleash and expand a little more is the concept of, if we would learn how to process our grief, it would
Mhm.
behoove us for the day when indeed we do lose a loved one, because we're all going to lose loved ones. I mean, that's part of being a human, right? I mean, we're
Yep.
going to lose those in our lives. But if we would understand even now that the processes and the red flags and the triggers are things like, I have no energy, I am, exhausted. My body doesn't feel the same. I have a headache. My joints are hurting, whatever. I'm just lethargic. I have no want or no joy to do anything. These are all pieces and processes of grief that will indeed hit us when we do lose someone, but it's happening, like you said, all day long, even when we're watching the news or talking to someone on the telephone.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. But talk about like processing it because, thinking about myself today, leaving the lake, how grateful am I to just be here when I can be here, right?
Even have a lake,
What a
right?
whiny little bitch. I mean,
Yeah,
seriously, what am I whining about? And it's more for me, it's because when I'm up here, the energy for me is just so lovely. Being by the water, the trees, and then when we get back home, I know it's going to be really hectic. And I think that that's part of why I'm grieving leaving because I know I'm going to hit the ground running with a whole bunch of stuff.
right,
And
right.
so
And
let's talk about,
actually,
yeah.
Actually, that is one of a category that we can even call anticipatory grief. So you're leaving somewhere and you're grieving that you have to go into the chaos, which you're actually pre-grieving.
Yeah.
So these are things that we do, and we'll do them in a number of ways. We can pre-grieve something or anticipatory wise grieve something that's coming. So we're already, and we do this with terminal illness, for example, or my
Mhm.
parents are getting really old, or I'm watching my spouse really deteriorate. And so we can find ourselves in different stages of grief all day long. We
Mhm.
have our typical stages of grief, what would be our Kubler-Ross ones, Elizabeth
Yeah.
Kubler-Ross. And I wrote about her in my book. A lot of the reason why I'm talking about this, by the way, is they're relaunching this book, which I'm so grateful for in terms of getting
Yay.
a bit more exposure again, because it kind of got caught up in COVID.
Mm,
And I think that it's so interesting that we're now seeing PTSD from COVID. We're seeing the grief of COVID. And that doesn't even mean the grief of the loss of life during COVID. It's loss of our lives during COVID. And I know I'm turning a different angle here, but I want to wrap this in because I was asked recently to write an article on grief for through the publisher here and
mm,
for another art magazine, and I'm like, okay. And I could go to my typical, I wrote about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. That's part of it. But I sat there and I thought, that's what everybody talks about. What I would like to talk about is that we're literally grieving on such a gigantic level on this planet. We are grieving our planet. We are grieving the lives that we didn't have even 4 years ago. It's ridiculous the amount of post-traumatic COVID syndrome that we do have in terms of the lives that we thought that we have in so many ways got taken away. And yet, did they? And so we're confused and we're like muddling through this change, and it's very grief oriented. And it's hard on people. They're old, their age. We were looking at pictures up at the cabin of only 5 years ago. We're like, what the hell? What happened to all of us in 5 years, And I mean, I'm not talking just about the 90-year-old parents. I'm talking about us. It's like, oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah. Yeah, I used to be brunette. I
That's
might grieve
funny.
that hair color, I don't know.
The shock of it all, right? But I think that this is important for us to understand that this planet is grieving a death and a rebirth. We
Yeah.
are going through dark nights of the soul, which is basically us grieving and letting go of belief systems. We are letting go of things that no longer serve us, but that does not mean it feels good in our body, right?
Yeah, when you're talking about the planet though, so for my body, I understand, certain things that I've let go over time and things that resurface. We've talked about this before in other podcasts, but for a planet, we're grieving the planet and we don't even necessarily know it. So
Right.
talk about that a little bit more because I want to understand what we how we contribute to releasing that grief.
Well, even let's say
matter.
take it as simple as something as the Schumann resonance. The Schumann
Mhm.
resonance, the pulse of the earth, the magnetic pulse inside the earth, like a heartbeat, boom, 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 was at 7 and 8 hertz. And what did we talk about just the other day? It hit what?
Oh, yeah, it was
One
like 78. It goes over 100 periodically.
easily over 100, up to
Yeah.
140 sometimes,
Mhm.
which means it's going do, 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 right? So this unearths us, no pun intended here. It unearths us. It disconnects us from that feeling of maternal, safe feeling of connected to a planet that we don't even consciously know we're doing, by the way. And our bodies are going, what is happening? I don't feel safe here. And so
Mhm.
again, we're grieving the way that the planet is changing because the planet felt like our normal. When our normal changes, we grieve that because we think we're scared, we're
Yeah.
losing something, we're
Mhm.
losing something. Basically, the definition of grief is it is losing something. It's the profound loss of something. So if we're even losing a frequency on our planet that we're used to, even though it might not be good for us any longer,
Mhm.
we're still grieving it. It's
Oh, yeah.
so much.
Mhm.
It's so much. And so, you know, AI, when I looked it up, that always has the new little thing on Google now or whatever. AI says this is this. And I loved how AI said it's grief is the normal response to a significant loss, the normal response. I don't think there is a normal anymore, first of
No.
all. And I
No.
certainly think when it comes to grief, there is no normal.
Mhm.
And we don't even know what our bodies are grieving. So part of the reason I wanted to bring this forward was to talk about, if you choose, obviously take what resonates, but get connected to what you're grieving every day, all day. Like you said, holy shit, I'm grieving going home.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I'm having anticipatory grief of all the shit I'm going to walk into when I get home.
Mhm. And
When we make those things normal, Kim, then real life grief in terms of real significant loss becomes more, I'm never going to say it's easy, but it becomes more natural and normal for us to go, oh, my emotions are involved in this.
that makes sense. It totally makes sense. Do you think, going back to the idea of COVID and how lives changed so much during that time, the fear that was created, I to me it seems like we grieve more because there's more fear,
Oh
like
gosh,
of the unknown. So we're trying to we grieve the past, whatever that lifestyle was, whatever that might be. I know people that are grieving the past
huge.
significantly. Life was so much better. And
Yep.
and I'm like, but I don't know. I mean, it changed in ways, and I guess your perspective of how you move forward makes it
Yep.
different. But
Yep.
so grieving is different now, I think, than previously. And maybe it was because we were wrapped up in running so fast in our lives that maybe we didn't pay attention to some of that, or is it because the fear was so much more significant
I think
during
it's
that
all of
time?
it, if I
Okay.
if I can guess, because here's the deal. Grief has always been there in a million ways. Even the indigenous were grieving leaving a spot on the planet that no longer was fertile for them to have crops, right? I mean, it was there. We always had it. I think this section of time, let's say it that way, that chapter in our lives, that 2020 and 2021, 22, was so profoundly fear-filled and orchestrated that so
Mhm.
many of us were really, really feeling, oh God, my entire world has changed and I'm terrified. Or there was many, many people that were like, I'm so grateful that this is changing because I don't have to go see people and I don't have to go out.
Mhm.
And that confused them too, because what am I grieving there? I mean, who
Yep.
am I? What am I? So our personalities, our lives, our belief systems, who we thought that we were, everything about us changed in those 2 years. And this has pushed us into a new space of, hopefully, humans feeling more. Hopefully, it's opening up our feel centers, because that's what this ascension process is about, as is the planet changing, to open our opportunities of being meat and bone situations that can feel
Mm.
and actually emote and find emotion and empathy again. And that's part of this process. But no one wants to emote and feel loss,
No.
especially if we lose a loved one. I don't want to relive losing a loved one. And yet, of course, you're doing it. You're doing it every day. Think
Yeah.
of an aging parent. We were up here together on the weekend, and you had your family up, I had mine. I had my 90-year-old parents up. You think not looking at your 90-year-old parents all weekend long is constant grief of, holy crap,
Yeah.
we're going to be dead pretty soon, right?
Mhm.
Or, wow, there's my little granddaughter. Now I'm the grandmother. And it's very confusing in our brains on where we are grieving when we don't know what we're grieving. So I was telling you last night when we were having a drink on the patio of I love to practice grief. I love to practice death, and I do it all the time. And I know it sounds weird, but I was sitting on the upper porch the other night watching my whole family out in the yard, just pretending that I was dead, going, huh, they're all going to be fine. They're all going to be fine. If I'm not here, this is still the scenario. Isn't this interesting? If I'm literally dead, I'm an omnipresent, so I can see this, I can be involved in it, I can hear it, I can appreciate it. This is what this can feel like. And I think we need to have those assurances in these human bodies because we've been so confused about what that means.
Yeah. Especially if you're caretaking for people or, really involved in, like say your parents, you're doing a lot, with
Yep.
them right now. And so if you're gone, you know, playing the if I'm gone, you
Yep.
realize that other people are going to pick up where you left off. It's
It
there.
did. It
Yeah.
did, exactly, because they were out there and they were in the mix, and somebody will do something. It isn't all about Suzanne, you know? Exactly. This gives us this comfort in this, like, wiggle space of going, life isn't all about me. When my body and my soul decides to go back home again, things are gonna shake out, you know?
Mhm.
And amazingly, on the very same day when we were having all these profound thoughts, we saw on Facebook the anniversary of our dear friend from the cabin that I wrote about in my book,
Oh
in the
yeah.
death book, and his name was Rick, and it was his 16th year since he is gone from this planet, and we're like, and our brains, we were having some drinks and toasting them, going, how can it possibly be 16 years? How, I mean, my brain just could not get around that. And yet, look at the things that have happened in 16 years. You know, you have a bunch of grandkids, you have this, you got new jobs, and we look at the losses, versus, oh my God, all these
Yeah.
things happened in 16 years, you know?
Yeah. Really great things. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that past thing really has got some people going though. I just have to, I don't know, the living in the past and trying to recreate the past, you
It
know,
just doesn't
so it
work.
doesn't work. It
Oh,
keeps you from enjoying the time right now.
yep.
Like I just there's someone and anyway, but I'm like, oh, you've got to move on. Like
Yeah.
you just need to really enjoy right now
Yeah.
and figure it out because that creates so much illness and depression and
Yep.
all kinds of things by
We
going
have
back
some
there.
family friends that lost a son years and years and years ago, and they still very much are stuck in, you know, in that vein, which is their choice because there's no timing for grief. There's nobody
Mm-mm,
gets to tell you how to grieve.
mm-mm,
And, you know, that's all fine and dandy, but sometimes I sit there and I think, you know, these are bigger ideas. Your body is taking a hit. This is what I want to go into now. Your body is taking a hit when you're grieving. When
mm-hmm,
your loved one is gone, this entire family, the extended family that was left on planet, has very, very, very many health challenges, all of them. Why? Because your immune system takes the hit.
mm,
You, when you're holding grief in your heart space, your heart chakra is that intricate chakra right in between your spiritual plane and your physical plane, which is going to be in charge of the life force energy to pull this whole thing together. And when we are in grief, we are diseasing our body, because we aren't letting go of that concept of honoring someone moving forward. So we will take an immune system hit like crazy. It will put us in fight or flight, which will end us in depression, for example. We'll lose energy.
that
We'll have,
must be a really important point because wind came up like crazy
yeah, your hair is doing the Beyonce, that's for
and
sure.
it's bonging over here and it's got to be like 30
Yeah.
mile an hour winds right now. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it is. This is crazy stuff because we can end up having appetite loss. We don't want to eat, we don't want to live, and it becomes almost like self-suicidal. In this family, it got one of the members of this family was very, very, very depressed, and this has been many, many, many years now, by the way. And yeah, I mean, he died quite young. And uh, again, I don't ever mean to sound condescending or lighthearted about death, but I grew up differently because of my dad being a mortician. I came into this planet differently, understanding the death process and soul contracts. And that doesn't make me better. It actually gets me in trouble because I oftentimes are like, you know, they're like, oh, he died way too young. And I'm like, no, he died when he was supposed to. Yeah, but he never got to get married. I go, yeah, but he wasn't supposed to get married or else he would have been married. You know, those thought patterns in my head have been there since day one for me. And I've
Yeah.
watched this family, even I saw them, a bunch of them recently, and they still speak past. They still speak in the past when it comes to that. And it's like, no, that soul contract of your loved one was to leave this planet for you to all move forward, you know?
Yeah, right. And
And
that's
their
it.
bodies are
And
taking a hit,
mhm,
you know?
mhm,
They're not eating, they're depressed, their lives are very small, their lives are very, and I'm not judging, I'm just saying they don't find the joy factors out there, like
mhm,
joy even in the wind. I mean, that feels like life itself if you allow it. And so life goes on because it's supposed to,
mhm, right,
right?
right. It
I mean,
is.
that's the
It's
point.
right. All these experiences are making you who you are. And so your perspective and how you work through the emotion and move through it is really important.
And intense grief, it can really become like, I have another client friend from years ago who lost a lot of his family. And he at one point said, I just don't want to be here anymore, Suzanne. I literally just want to. And he was referring to the fact that he was willing to take his own life so he could go hang out with his loved ones. And I looked at him, I said, you do realize that's not going to happen, right? And he goes, what do you mean? They're all over there. I love the
Hmm.
description. And then I'll be with them. And I said, actually, you won't. And I said, when that soul dies and passes into what we call a different frequency of what we would say heaven or whatever the in between, their frequency is different. When you leave this planet because you want to be with them, you have a lower fear based frequency and they've already done their work. You will not resonate with those people until you do all this work.
Hmm.
And you're either going to do this work on this side of the plane or that side of the plane. And so you're not going to have this happy, wonderful reunion. You may indeed, which most likely you'll see them when you die as an entrance, as a greeting,
Hmm.
but it will not be that eternal, let's hang out together because the frequencies don't match.
That's so cool that you're talking about that because I always wondered more about suicide, what that means, like to pass through
Yep.
um, and so the frequency piece of it, like you said, and I just want to restate it again because it took me a while to get my head around it. If you don't do the work here in this lifetime, you're going to have to do it before you get to that like essence frequency place that you're meant to
Yes.
be.
Yes.
That's
Because
so
let's say, for
interesting.
example, I'm down here and I'm connected to my higher self up here, and this is my contract of work. If I stop
Mhm.
my contract halfway through, whether it's suicide or choosing to leave or whatever, I still have this amount of work to do. This can even happen without suicide, by the way. I'm just not doing my work. I still have to do my work,
So you're
right?
making choices here not to do the work.
Finish
And
your
by the
contract.
right. And so you can die as an old person, but because
Yeah.
you didn't do the things you contracted to do and made choices and never got back on the path, you're actually gonna have to do the work anyway.
So let's bring it back to that other family I was discussing. That whole family is still upset and grieving for what, 30 some years, right?
Mhm.
They are only halfway through their choice too. So the day that they think that they're going to see their son on the other side, they will, but not continually because they still have all this work to do because that son has been in omnipresence for years doing the work. And so even grief is prohibiting the soul work, right?
Gosh,
Because
that's
the
so important.
soul is not sad that they're dead. The soul is reunited at home.
Mhm.
And so it's important for us to get our heads around this stuff and do our own individual work. And it's weird because people seem to think that there's this grief thing that makes me feel like I'm still connected to you or doing something with you, for you, around you because I'm sad. And it's the
Mhm.
exact opposite. If I honor the fact that your soul knows what it's doing and it's crossed because it's supposed to, my job is to find joy here. My job is to find an embodiment of an experience beyond what I came to do, not yours. And
Right.
so we're very confused on that process. Does
It
that
is
make
so
some sense?
confusing. Oh yeah, it does. And I think it's important that I think we've done a little discussion or we've done a podcast, I believe, on contracts,
Yeah.
touching on contracts. It's a hard concept to get if you've never heard of it before.
Yes.
Um, because it, like, again, because of my religious beliefs, even that, it fits into that when you actually look at it and get into the detail. I never thought of it as something I signed up to do, like picking my family, going through the experiences. You're like, what the, I would have never, would I? I think, yeah, I would have picked my family, but I can imagine people are like, oh, hell no. I
Yep.
would not, so
I
that whole contract,
get that every time. Yep.
yeah, it makes so much sense because, yeah, if you're not following your instincts and really putting yourself out there to go through life in a more joy-filled, filled way, you're keeping yourself from your contract and the
Exactly.
work that you're meant to do.
I
So,
got in a very large argument one time with a person I know about that concept, and they were so taken aback on the idea that someone would have signed up to lose a parent or a child or whatever at an early age. And I said, you don't have to believe anything I'm saying, but contract wise, that's what the belief is,
mhm,
because you are still on this planet with a soul lesson on how to move forward, embody what the source energy wants to experience down here
mhm.
separately than that person's contract. And so it's like you step into their contract and take it when you're stuck in grief.
Yeah,
Your
right.
contract is to keep going from the grief. Your contract, if that person has left this planet, means your contract is still be here on this planet and do something with that, not step
Mhm.
into their contract and hold it frozen. And so that caused a very big rift for a long time because that
Yeah.
belief system was so difficult for that person to understand. And, to this day, it's just sort of a conversation we just don't go in, and that's fine. I'm not here to make people believe anything. All I'm saying is
Choices.
it will give you so much peace if you allow yourselves to think through it that way, to honor someone's contract, to understand we all have a contract and we've co-contracted. It's really important.
Well,
So,
and I think you mix failure in there too of
oh
I could
God,
have been a better parent or a better son or a better,
the,
and when you add that into the grief with the fear of
yeah.
moving forward, you're stuck.
Well, and again, you hit a really good one to unleash even more in that we start to step in people's contracts all day long. I should have been a better mom. That kid would have had a better job. We do it all day long. If we would just stay out of each other's sandboxes, it would really be helpful for everybody, right? But we really do it when it comes to um, death,
Yeah.
right? And I think what's so interesting for death too is people have this beautiful way of remembering things that aren't really the way that it was when
Mhm.
people are gone. They will romanticize situations and things. He was so wonderful. She was so awesome. And I'm not saying they weren't wonderful or awesome, but the way that we remember is maybe you should also remember the difficulties and all of that because that
Yeah.
person has that ability to be all of those things. Therefore, you have the ability to be all those things. We get stuck in each other's contracts that way as well. Does that make
Mhm.
a little bit of sense? I know
Yeah,
that was a
it
lot.
does. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Oh
we hold
gosh.
guilt. And then, oh my goodness, I was working with I have had just so many clients with this death and grief lately. And I was on a remote call with someone who was going through the death process for the first time with a parent. And it was very all brand new. It was like, I don't even know what to do with this. I don't know what to do with this at all. And what we forget is this is natural.
Yeah.
This is part of the journey. We are supposed to die. And if we would get our heads around that, we would have a different situation of, oh, okay, I'm honored to be in this death process with this parent right now.
Mhm.
Not, oh shit, mom or dad is leaving the planet. What do I do?
Right.
And so I talked extensively with that person. And it was funny because I was working on the hospice situation all at the same time. And because I'm an empath, I could feel the shift in the body. And as we were talking, I'm like, oh my God, he's actually shifting right now. I can feel it, which kind of weirded the conversation out a little. But and then yeah, sure enough, he closed down literally within 12 hours after
Oh my
that.
gosh.
So it's awesome to be able to die that smoothly, to be able to leave this planet and exit gracefully. That's
Mhm.
what we are designed to do. But
Right.
instead, we mess each other up so much by getting in each other's energy fields, right?
And adding all the emotion and all the things that go with it. It's like, yeah, it's not a
Yeah.
good mix.
And we really, I think, want to open up our brains a little bit, what we started with, because we can have grief and death over loss of a job. We
Mhm.
can have it over loss of weight, literally, or gaining. We can, the end of a job, the end of a financial situation, someone literally when people are retired, isn't this great? Oh my God, that can just blow up in your face because all of a sudden your ownership of who and what I was egoically is grieving. And we don't
Yeah.
understand that.
Well, and I think that the what do you call it? Like the habitual part of whatever you were doing before
Yeah.
was so you didn't have to think a lot about it because you just did it. And now all of
Routine.
a sudden the routine. Yeah, like what do I do now? I
Yeah.
don't have a routine. I don't have anybody telling me what to do
And
or
it
any
pulls the rug out from you. I remember when I left corporate, I was so stunned because I didn't have anybody to do things with me and for me. Like I had to make my own plane reservation. And I didn't even know how. What a
yeah,
dork. It's like,
I
okay,
grieved. I grieved. I
yeah.
wow, that
That's
was
a
hard.
huge grieving, and we can lose our health. Think of a health situation. We have another dear friend who's doing a health thing right now, and loss of body parts. I've had so many clients have cancer in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
Literally taking out an organ is a
Yep.
grief and a loss. Just exactly, not the same. There is no same. So don't ever, don't think I'm being flippant about this. Losing an organ isn't like losing a child or a parent. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's all the same concept of how the body does a grief process. Now, to the extent or the intensity, all changes, but it's still a belief system. I can have a grieving when I don't have children. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden I hit 43 and my eggs are not working, whatever, right?
Yeah, right.
I can have surgery and then maybe I don't have my sexual appetite anymore. And that's a huge grief because my fertility in my youth is gone.
Mhm.
These are really big things that we're doing all day long. I can't drive anymore. I can't go to Peru because I can't walk up Machu Picchu. I mean, there's things that we grieve to the extent of our bodies are doing serious work and we're not aware of it. And I think what I'm wanting to get across hopefully today is that get in touch with all of those grief steps and get emotional about the emotions attached to them and own all of those emotions so that the day that you do lose a partner, a child, a parent, a dog, you have the capacity to go, holy crap, I really feel blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
And when you recognize it, you can actually work through it.
Yes.
That's the thing, but not recognizing it, it just piles on, through
Because
the
so many people run away from grief and they shove it and they don't know how. And here's the other thing. Again, being a mortician starter, I'm very grateful. I remember going to a funeral where I walked right up to my girlfriend and said some smart ass comment as she was, in the grieving line. And it's like, no, because you and I have a different relationship, like you had to have your husband die for me to come and see you. Really? And she's like, oh God, thank you. Because we don't know what to say
Yeah,
that's respectful or not respectful. Well, that for me, for her and our friendship level, that was respectful for her to have a moment to breathe and not be this zombie, in the moment. So we want to really remember the person and the personality that we're dealing with oftentimes changes so profoundly because I don't know what to say.
right.
I don't know how to talk to you. I don't want to make
Yeah.
you feel worse. Well, trust me, you can't make me feel worse. Uh,
It's
You
true.
know?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh, it's hard. It is. It's even what to write in a card for somebody when something like that happens. You
yep.
just they hear the same thing over and over, and I've just
Oh,
heard people
yeah.
say, "Oh my God, if I hear
One
everything's
more
gonna be
person.
okay one more time, I think
I'm
I'm just
sorry for your
gonna."
loss. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yet we do it. Well, we all do it because you got to say something and you don't know what to say and you don't want to rock the boat. But
right.
they are in such a state of shock and numbness at that point that I think that that is even more infuriating. And when they are in the stages of like, disbelief or bargaining or yearning or all these weird stages that we go through, it's really important for us to know that the stages are not normal and they don't
Mhm.
end and they're constantly coming and reviving. It can get complicated. It can be delayed. It can be triggered. It can be anything. So why are you worried about walking on eggshells? Because the eggshells aren't going anywhere,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
Yeah, yeah, it's very true.
And on the other hand, I think it's important for us to allow ourselves to move through the grief and say, it's okay for me to find joy. I don't need to feel guilty about feeling great that I'm doing this and so's gone. These
Yeah,
are important things,
right,
right?
right. And it is like you said, it's healthy to go through the stages. But
Yes.
when recognizing what you're feeling at that time and really owning it, because it's just shove it aside and keep going, you're numbing yourself down for
Yes.
all the feelings of joy and happiness and things that will come along every day.
And numbing, Kim, can become really normal. after
Mhm.
a while. And that
Mhm.
sounds really weird, but it is. Numbing, whether you're doing it with drugs or alcohol or just checking out or whatever, numbing can be habitual.
Yeah,
And now that habit becomes my normal. And now I don't know how to not be numb, or I don't know how to interact anymore because I made that normal.
right.
And that's dangerous because that isn't normal.
Mhm.
Being connected is what we are here to do. Being empathic, being able to feel one another, being able to share. And I'm not saying somebody's going to do grieving the right or the wrong way, because there is no right or wrong way.
Mhm.
There just, and there's no timeline. There is
Mhm.
no, anything that a person is feeling inside of them at that moment is their right, is their
Mhm.
correct. We can't change that.
Right.
But being able to do the work yourself is what I'm referring to. Allow yourself to be really honest and say, holy crap, I've limited my life experience because I'm still in that other person's sandbox playing their
Mhm.
role, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, it's all kinds of little things that if you're not paying attention will pile up.
I think the reason why they pile up and we're in each other's sandbox is because, again, we do this normally anyway. Humans have this really great capacity to make everything about us.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you died and it doesn't make sense to my life cycle, now I'm screwed. Like, if I lose somebody younger than me, whether it's a sibling, a child, anything, right? A
Mhm.
nephew, it's like, no, 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 you're supposed to be after me because I'm older in this hierarchy of age.
Mhm.
And we are ridiculous in that regard because that isn't even a thing.
Right.
And we make it a thing. So now I'm like, well, wait, no, I should be dying before you because I'm older. Now, what that does is it puts a subconscious burner in the back of my brain, like, holy crap, I'm going to be dead pretty soon. So we even take that experience subconsciously to the extent of anticipatory grief, constantly running all day long.
Oh, just makes you tired.
Right?
Tired. Yeah.
Instead of honoring the fact that that particular being in a soul essence only came down here to experience something for 20 years or whatever, right? I mean, that's understanding that and honoring that is just so incredibly, yeah. And when we're doing that, sitting in other people's sandboxes, it affects all of our relationships because other people that don't think the same way are going, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So now my relationship with you is going to be affected
It is.
because,
Yeah.
you're still here and I have a relationship with you, but where did you go? Why are you not here? I mean, it starts to really, that ripple effect will go through all the relationships then.
I can see that. I didn't think of it that way either because your focus is in a place that, like you said, the other people are perceiving differently than you,
Yep.
and what you're doing. And I'm sure there's some judgment in there as well.
And huge
You know,
resentment. And don't
if
forget
Mhm.
what that's going to do in the ripple effect is it's going to go back to that triad that we talk about all the time. If I lose someone and I'm totally grief stuck over here and I've checked out here and I have relationships over here, these people are now being affected by my actions of not letting go of that contract, right?
Mhm.
And now these people are going through the, if you loved me enough, you'd be participatory. If you loved me enough, you'd still see I was pained or grieving too. If I was as important to you as that person was, and we start to get resentful and judgmental on a either cognitive or subconscious basis, right?
Mhm.
And this triggers our, so now we're three ripples over, this triggers our sense of worth and safe.
Oh my gosh. That just keeps going.
Yes.
It and it changes your whole life. Like,
Yes.
not just for that one person that's now not there but your whole surrounding life changes.
So now the person on the third ripple out is constantly either on eggshells or disconnected or angry or whatever, because if you love me enough, you'd see I was still here.
Yeah.
Think of the competition that gives somebody,
Mhm.
to
Mm.
give so much love and attention to someone that isn't so-called here. Now let's wrap this all up because they are still here. What if we would understand omnipresence or omniscience means they are still here. They're here in energy. I mean, we were, giggling about our friend, like I said, Rick at the cabin. We're like, I will crack a Bud Light at the beer for him. We toasted him last night. You get to still have those memories, those beautiful wonderings. Do we miss calling him on the phone or stopping at the cabin? Of course. But it is up to us to put that energy into that feeling, that memory, so that the triggers are great triggers instead of sad triggers.
Right,
So we all, if we would take our own self-responsibility for being on this planet still, then things would be different.
right, right. It is taking responsibility is a big part of this, and really, really digging in to understand what you're doing with yourself
And
and the
knowing
feelings.
triggers are okay. Really,
Mhm,
triggers are not going to go anywhere. That song on the
mm-mm,
radio is still going to pop up. By
mhm.
maybe the fifth time when the song pops up, instead of being so sad, you're like, oh yeah, there's my dad. That's awesome. I mean, you can really change that around because you are in that moment of a belief system trigger, not
Mm.
just anything beyond that. It's just always the belief system. And
Oh,
remember, we're all dying. I think what's so interesting about this article that I'm pondering how to write, we're all dying every day. Of course,
mhm,
we're dying. You're dying all day long.
yeah,
So go
mhm,
out into nature if you choose. Go stare. This is a perfect time, especially in Minnesota. Stare at the trees. Watch how the leaves are turning. Watch how they're falling down. Watch how nature, in and of itself, has the design intelligence to go through the process of death and rebirth, because that's simply all we're doing. And if we were taught from day one that death is not the end, instead of death thinking it's final, if we really understood that our chakra system and our templates of our auric fields are just transmutations into something that is like the tree rebirthing, we wouldn't be so freaked out about all
mhm.
of this stuff.
Oh, I can tell you, this has taken a lot of years, but going through the process of understanding, from what a contract is to understanding my own beliefs and feelings and all of the things, memories, all the things. It brings a peacefulness to you when you're
Yes.
no longer fearing all of that, and grieving it. What was that?
Oh my God, that's so funny. I have my
Good.
phone sitting across the way, and when you
Yeah.
said that, Siri went, uh-huh. That is a riot.
It's kind of like
Okay.
that huge wind that came up when you were talking about something really important. It was like, whoa.
Yeah, so Siri understands that was important. That was a little creepy, but kind of funny.
That's
Yeah,
right.
if we were a culture that honored death
Yeah.
instead of feared it, if
Yeah.
we and I was really fortunate to do another interview for that first book the other day with a lovely lady that we talked about, our culture does not honor death at
Mm-mm,
all. At all.
mm-mm.
And I mean, think of the indigenous and the cultures of the natives and all the cool freaking rituals and all the stuff and everything that was like, that's part of it. You got to do all this,
Yeah.
and we just are scared. And I was so grateful to even talk to this person, this friend the other day about his dad dying because it was things he never even thought about. I'm like, look for this in the room. See if you see this. And, so now he ran out and got my book so that he can go back and even like, oh, 2 weeks ago he died, but I can remember this, or even 2 years ago, or even 10 years ago. I can remember that this was a thing. And now I can put that to peace. I can put that to ease. I can put that to grace. We can move through grief. It doesn't ever go away, but we definitely can move through and process it. And I think that's our jobs to get that message out that grief is a part of life
Mhm.
in every aspect of life, every day, all day, every day, death and rebirth, death and rebirth. That's what this is.
Yep.
And when we finally can get our heads around this, hopefully we can, open our hearts to this stuff.
Absolutely. It's so important. I'm just
So a couple of things to round it down with is how
Mhm.
to cope in the long term is definitely take care of yourself. When we let ourself, who's left on planet, go down the crapper because we're angry, upset, resentful, mad, confused, any of that, it's our self-responsibility, in my opinion, that you are still on this planet. Your contract is not done or you wouldn't be here.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's important for you to understand that I do need to eat. I do need to sleep. I do need to exercise. I do need to interact. I do need to receive from others and give to others, etc. And talking things through, but really listening, not just talking, because a lot of people that are stuck in that grief loop will just talk about it, but they don't hear the support that they're getting during the talking. And I think this is why the other loved ones or friends or family in the perimeter are like, I've been saying it, but he or she doesn't hear it,
Right.
that kind of a thing. Like with this family that we knew, we were saying things for many, many years, and they're like, they were so busy talking that they didn't hear.
Mhm.
And I think that's that's a self thing you got to be aware of. Being patient is something that is really critical. There is no timeline to grief, and there is no way to do it. There is no right, there is no wrong. Hence, we cannot judge another's grief
Mhm.
journey. But that's tough because we
Because you
want,
cannot, you can't
yeah,
force it.
yeah, we want to be there for
Yeah,
them. It's like,
yeah.
okay, and you can't do the old, it's been 6 months, I love that. I love that one. You lose a child and then, you have a miscarriage or a stroke. Well, you can get pregnant again. It's like, that is not your choice to say,
Mm,
those are really, really,
no,
so find that compassionate, unjudgmental kind of support without saying flippant things like that, because that can really hurt somebody.
right.
And ultimately, professional health or grief groups are really important. But like you said, one of the things I came in with a lot of this knowledge, but when I started to really study Akashic records and soul contracts, this brought everything to a level of honor that
Mhm,
I had never experienced until I was really deep into understanding the honor behind the concept of that person gets to
mhm,
die.
right.
And that is so critical, because if I honor and love someone enough, I will not be hanging on to their grief tail. It's like holding
Mhm,
a kite and just keeping it down from flying. How dare you? you
right.
know and so these are the things that I hope are going to get across to our culture a little bit more and more as this PTSD COVID bullshit stuff starts to unearth itself, so that we don't go through that process again.
Yeah, I think that people don't understand either, because we just kind of experienced this with another family, is when they hold on so tight, they're holding them here longer than they need to be.
Yeah,
And they're suffering, like it's okay to let go. You know?
especially in the actual hospice death process. If I'm in a
Yeah.
hospital, if I'm in hospice and that person is hanging on, this is what I was doing on the phone call the other day. In your head, in your heart, telepathically or out loud, whatever you choose, if you choose, allow them to go, because that allows their process to go smoother. How could you
Mhm,
possibly feel good about keeping your kid from going to college and having experiences, or going to Hawaii and having a vacation? I mean, it's the same thing. Let them go on to the next chapter
mhm.
of what it is that soul is contracting to do. How dare I stand in the way because I make it about me?
Right. Right.
Oh,
Yeah. Ego.
yeah.
I work through the ego. It's not easy.
Right? So my suggestion is go outside, look at nature. This is a wonderful, beautiful time of the year to find rebirth and death, death and rebirth over and over again. There's a million ways you can soften your heart to this idea, or take it or leave it. Like I
Yeah.
said, we're not here to change anyone's process or mind, but that it's a tough subject and it's not going anywhere. So hopefully we
Mhm.
can open our hearts and our conversations to it.
Well, and I hope people find your book as you're re-putting it out, because that really helped me through, one,
Yeah.
understanding death more, but two, working through death with others and
Yes.
actually writing prayer around death. It's helped me to see everything differently in a way that is just so much healthier.
Well,
Um,
and right before we hang up, why don't you touch on that, Kim? Because I know some of our listeners know that you do write prayer, and they can reach out to you through our podcast or through my website to find you for prayer. But when you're writing a prayer for someone for loss, or in the midst of dying or whatever,
mhm.
what ties that heart space for them to let go? Do you have any idea? Like, what are the ideas of the concepts that you offer where you have gotten feedback that it's like, oh my gosh, that really helped?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things. One, the family really hanging on, and just like when they're in the room with them as they're going through the death process, they're hanging on so tight, and they don't know what to say, don't know what to do, um, and they really don't want to let them go. And then the other part of it is I found that especially the elderly now are such strong beings, most of them, that they're like more earthbound than most people, it feels like to me, because they went through a lot of hard times,
Yes.
growing up, or poverty consciousness, a lot of different like 3D type things, where they hang on tight because they don't want to leave their things, they don't want to leave their people. And so the prayers that I have shared recently, and well, over time, it really is, we're here with you to support you, and we love you. Um, but your angels are with you, your people are with you, your guides are with you. It's okay. We're going to see you again, and you're going to be around us. We know you're going to be around us when we need you. And it's okay to let go.
Yep.
And that prayer has been shared with several people that within, gosh, usually about 12 hours, which is really weird. 12
Mhm.
hours. You'd mentioned 12 hours before, but it's like
Yep.
within 12 to 24 hours, they let go. And,
It's
but it
because
also brings,
once we get to that heart chakra, those spiritual chakras just go boom,
just
boom,
go
boom,
whoop.
typically. Yep.
And once they open up their heart, to the support that they have in as they go, it seems like it goes really quickly.
Yep.
And but it also was very freeing for the family. It's brought a different perspective of the death for them when they actually read the prayer to them. It was a different experience for them at the same time.
I can see it. I can see it kicking up.
Yes, I know you're here with us.
That's right. Isn't that
Yeah,
great? I
yeah.
told my kids the day I die, I'm coming in like a tsunami just to make a point. Just like,
Well,
yeah.
my grandmother told me there would be thunder and lightning, and she died, and there was a huge ice storm with thunder and lightning, and it was,
Awesome.
and then the day of her funeral, it was like an icicle kingdom. Like it was just
Oh,
gorgeous,
that's great.
it was amazing. So yeah, you got the power.
See, and you can find joy in that. I think that
Mhm.
that's what's so cool. And again, like when I was sitting on this porch looking down at my family the other night, and I know it sounds weird to some people to practice death, but it was so heartfelt to know that I had done my job.
Yeah, right.
My work here is done in a million ways for that piece and fractals of who Suzanne came to be.
Mhm.
Does that mean that all the fractals of my essence are done? No. It actually releases me in terms of I don't have to be there to be that mother or that partner the same anymore because those pieces of that script are finished.
Mhm.
And I get to, by practicing death, understand that I did my job. There's nothing that needs to be unresolved. And I understand when my heart opens that I will be there to see so and so grow up or get married. It's just not in meat form. And that is okay. It is so transformative to really practice that. And when I tell people that, they just go, oh, okay. But trust me, it's very interesting. It's a different form of manifestation.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that I want to leave the planet tomorrow, but if I did, I literally think the crossing process would be so much easier because you've made peace with that stuff.
Mhm.
And that's our job, is to be able to, what do you want your vehicle to do? You're going to die how you live because you're living as you're dying. I'm
Mhm.
going to say that again. You're going to die how you live because as you're living right now, your body's already dying. So
Mhm.
I'm going to either die or live in fear fuel or love fuel. Choose. Choose your
Right,
fuel because you're in
right.
charge of it.
Yeah, and I think what you said is important because when I went through the process of allowing my children their own journey without controlling it,
Yep.
that was the first step in that process to find peace that they are who they are and they are on their own contract, that it's they're making their choices, it's their free will. And once I got to that place, it was like, holy that it was such a relief
Yep.
as a parent. And then like taking that next step to say, what's it going to be like when I'm gone? I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to do that. I haven't taken it that far. But it's got to be freeing for me, as
Yeah.
a soul, to know it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, and I mean, it is okay. Our dogs, our animals are no different. You
Mhm.
know, we have our dogs with us. We have our cats with us. We have our whatever's with us. This is all an omnipresent situation. And the more that we can play with this on a magical level, I think the more healing it is.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
That's a really great practice.
Cool. All right. On behalf of both of us, go play with nature. See if you can learn something on death and rebirth if you choose. Take what resonates, toss what doesn't.
Yeah.
Until next time, everybody, maybe hit the like button, share, or subscribe. And next time, cosmic hugs.
Yeah. Goodbye.